This is the World Organic News for the week ending 13th of August 2018. John Moore reporting. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. We begin this week with a good news post from Susan's mum's blog entitled Some Coral Reefs Resist Climate Change. As sea levels rise, coral reefs will play an even greater role in protecting coastlines, but only if they are living reefs. The coral bleaching from the last 2 summers that affected the Great Barrier Reef kills off this natural wonder. A dead reef crumbles under the power of the ocean, and when they're gone, they're gone. From the Post, quote, Josh Gabbitas reports in the UK's Independent, sections of coral reef in the Pacific and the Caribbean are fighting back against the global threats that have decimated reefs worldwide. While the discovery does not allow any room for complacency in the fight to save the world's reefs from extinction, scientists are tentatively optimistic about what they can learn from these pockets of resistance, end quote. Thankfully, coral reefs haven't been farmed, which means they haven't been farmed industrially. Therefore, they maintain a substantial level of genetic diversity. That diversity is what allows life to adjust when conditions change. The rate of change determines if the genetic diversity has a chance to affect the outcome. Think of the mass extinction that wiped out the dinosaurs. Fairly abrupt and no amount of genetic diversity could save most of the dinosaurs. Some, though, the birds, survived, evolved and radiated out across the globe. The hope with these tough little corals is we can identify them and assist them to cope with what's happening. Let's hope this resilience is more widespread than we realise. Now to a post from Enkicha Dorora, shifting the seasons themselves due to climate change. Quote, according to scientists, due to global warming, there will be an increased likelihood of extreme weather condition events. In India, some regions are experiencing these changes already, which are manifested in various forms, including flood and record-setting heat waves. And from later in the post, around 1,500 people died due to intense heat wave this year. It's one of the worst bouts of hot weather for several years. Reports said, this year the heat wave continued for a longer period than in previous years, and temperatures were 2 to 5 degrees higher than the season's average, end quote. It may not be that the seasons are actually changing, given that the angle of the Earth hasn't, but that the extremes of each are pushing into what was traditionally been the usual times for seasonal change. So the last European winter lasted through until April here in Ireland, before jumping fairly abruptly into a droughty summer. We'll just have to watch and see. As a defence to some extent against these changes, the answer would appear to be a more perennial approach to agriculture. Trees and shrubs have deeper and more complex root structures than cereals or vegetables. We know the fungal networks within the soil are better developed within perennial ecosystems and have a balancing function in those ecosystems for nutrients and that sort of thing. Getting a well-developed perennial system up and running during periods of climatic variability is not as easy as during periods of stability, but it can be done. There's an old Chinese proverb that goes something like this. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best is now. And a final quote from the Post, quote, a healthy planet and stable climate aren't political issues. It should be a combined effort, and now is the time to get everyone on board, end quote. Fine sentiments indeed. Our next post is from the ABC in Australia. Hydrogen fuel breakthrough in Queensland could fire up massive new export market. Quote, 2 cars powered by hydrogen derived from ammonia will be tested in Brisbane today thanks to a Queensland breakthrough that CSIRO researchers say could turn Australia into a renewable energy powerhouse. End quote. You'd have thought with the wide open spaces, a low rainfall and plenty of sunshine, Australia would already be a renewable energy superpower by now. The problem, apart from conservative politicians denying climate change and subsidising fossil fuel producers and right-wing unions in the fossil fuel sector, has always been saving the energy for later use. I've talked about pumped hydro in earlier episodes, and that seems like a thing for the electricity grid. This hydrogen-ammonia hydrogen cycle breakthrough discussed in the quoted piece is an altogether different beast. Hydrogen has some advantages over batteries for vehicles, mostly in weight but also in refilling. As we can currently refill an LPG vehicle in the same time as a diesel or petrol one, hydrogen can replace the LPG and eventually the other fuels too. It can be used as LPG, that is, burnt as a gas, or it can power fuel cells. Either way, the only exhaust is water. The big problems with hydrogen are storage and transportation. What this new technology does is add gaseous hydrogen to ammonia for transport, then, and this is the clever part, Extract the hydrogen from the ammonia by passing it through a membrane. Ammonia is no more difficult nor dangerous to transport than fossil fuels. We already have a system set up for doing this, so the technology is tried and tested. The time it takes to fill the tank of a hydrogen-powered vehicle is about the same as filling a petrol tank. No great leap of faith for consumers, and here's the kicker. The hydrogen can be extracted from water, H2O, as we remember from school, by electrolysis. That is, bursting apart the molecular bonds in water molecules by applying electricity to them. Huge solar farms in the flatter, drier areas of the Antipodes could be devoted to this practice and wind towers set up as well, miles from anyone. Happily converting sunshine or air movement into electricity, then hydrogen, which is then stored in ammonia for transport. Just think about that for a moment. A complete energy system dependent upon renewables with no need for a fossil fuel ever. If it can be scaled up in Australia, it can be scaled up in other hot, dry places. Morocco springs to mind, the Atacama Desert, huge parts of sub-Saharan Africa and Western China are all in this area. And if wave energy becomes a thing, along every coastline in the world, except maybe Antarctica. The key breakthrough was the ammonia storage and the membrane extraction. Hydrogen was the forgotten renewable for the past decade or so, but this technology brings it back to centre stage. Changing all the world's vehicles over to hydrogen is less of an issue than making them all battery-powered. Same fuel could also be used to run power stations, trains, and for crying out loud, even monorails. I'm rather excited by this. It may just be the missing piece that allows a swift conversion to renewables. It would need to be scaled and quickly, but it is doable. And on that happy note, I will draw this episode to a conclusion. Remember, decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. As a podcast listener, you may be thinking of producing your own podcast, but you're not sure where to begin. Drop over to mrjohnmore.com and pick up the free checklists I've written to help you get started. I'm also doing live presentations twice a week on YouTube and putting them up as podcasts under the show name Pod Thoughts to help you through the process. Link in the show notes and details at the website mrjohnmore.com. A transcript of this episode is available at worldorganicnews.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back next week.